I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Graham Noble, Sarah Cowgill, Tim Donner, and Joe Schaefer. And this is Liberty Nation's online TV news program. On today's episode, to fear or not to fear? That is the question. President Trump's message of optimism and hope regarding COVID-19 has the left seething with anger. Election 2020, policy and personality. As Election Day nears, our panel wonders whether the American people will vote on the issues, the person, both, or neither. 5 things that matter. Our C5 panel picks up on the things that matter most to them and you. And loony leftist clips contest. So many clips, so little time. You won't want to miss this, folks. All this and more in our newly formatted program, The Conservative 5. Try as we might, COVID-19 is still hanging around and will be a factor in the upcoming election. Following his release from Walter Reed, an upbeat, can-do message from President Trump not to fear the virus sparked a furious response from the left. Is the president tone deaf, or is the left just bound and determined to put a negative spin on every single word that comes out of the president's mouth? Sarah, let's start with you. I think everyone watching this knows what Trump said, that we shouldn't fear COVID or let it dominate our lives. But the minute he said that, I kind of knew his opponents were going to jump all over that statement. Is the president not self-aware enough to understand that leftists will take a statement like that and turn it around? Or does he just not care what they think? Or option 3, and then I swear I will shut up and let you talk. Does he make these kinds of comments on purpose just to kind of rile the left up?
Well, I think you could say he does all of the above at any given time on any given day, simply to make some noise. If he cured COVID, they'd still be saying nasty things. Why didn't he cure it yesterday? Damn it. Why the hell did he have to go to Walter Reed first? It doesn't matter what the heck he says. So he just keeps going, one foot in front of the other and I don't think he cares. I really don't think he cares.
I would agree with that. I really think he struck exactly the right tone with that message. And quite frankly, I think it's a message that the American people needed to hear. The level of fear and hysteria over this virus is just completely over the top. And that's me using a bit of famous British understatement. It's completely over the top, and I thought his words were great. People shouldn't fear this virus. They shouldn't allow it to dominate them. Okay, take precautions, particularly if you've been diagnosed with it. It makes sense to maybe not be wandering around the grocery store at all, social distancing or not, mask or not. Maybe you should be inside. But everybody else needs to stop, as the president said, allowing this virus to dominate their lives. It's ridiculous.
Tim, let me just ask you, do you think there was something Churchillian about what Trump said that maybe the peeps didn't get over there on the left?
Well, I think he was attempting to be Churchillian. He certainly is a fan of Winston Churchill and has invoked his name on numerous occasions over the last 5 years when he talks about leadership. And I think he clearly feels that leadership is to say, we're not going to let this virus defeat us. Let's live with it, not apart from it, because it's a reality of life. But is it going to lead us to shut down our lives and the economy? Because I can guarantee you, if we do it again, we do a national shutdown again, we are into a depression. There's no question about it. But then examine the converse. The converse is we should be afraid of it. Okay, so if we should be afraid of it, what sort of decisions is that going to lead the American people to? Not very good ones, I would say.
Well, I think, honestly, look at the guy. He's the poster boy for the, percentage, a very small percentage death rate. He's in his 70s. He's a tad on the portly side, and he walked in and out of there in 3 days. So if he can do that, then certainly, the average 30, 40, 50-year-old healthy person shouldn't be terrified.
That's a legitimate point. What do you think, Joe?
Well, I just think that all of this is, again, a Democratic talking point. I don't believe we're talking about the election. I have never believed, and I do not believe, that there's this mass of undecided voters who is like gee, what is Trump saying on the coronavirus? This is going to impact my vote. I think you can almost break it down on party lines. If you believe in the establishment, if you believe in expertism, if you live in an urban or heavily a dense suburban environment, you're more prone to welcome these lockdowns and wearing your little mask like a sheep. If you live in a rural kind of red area that voted for Trump in 2016, you're not buying any of this garbage. So I think there is an almost split on this. There is not this massive group of undecided voters saying, gee, what did Trump do? This is going to turn the election. And they want it to be a talking point. They want it to be an issue because, again, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris aren't offering the American people a reason to vote for them. So it's, hey, can we use this against Trump? I don't think it's going to work, but anything that they can do to hit this guy, they're going to keep doing.
The reason to vote for him is because he's not Donald Trump. I mean, he's in essence been a cardboard cutout with the words "not Trump" on the front of it. That's all he's been. But what's it going to be?
Years in Washington, D.C., and that's all he is.
Right.
I'd like to play off of Graham's comment a little bit. I think what we're dealing here, what seems to be what we're dealing with COVID-19 is a highly contagious, not so virulent virus to anyone under the age of maybe 70. And like you said, Sarah, even at 74, I mean, of course, not everybody gets Walter Reed care, but does anybody else agree with me that this is, it's a nasty virus, but it's not really going to kill you unless you're in a very specific subgroup demographic?
Well, it's 3 times as contagious, at least, as the flu. And if the flu was 3 times as contagious, it would probably kill about the same number of people. So it's just a matter of how virulently contagious it is rather than how deadly it is, because the average age of a person who died from COVID is between 78 and 80. And of course, there's comorbidities, pre-existing conditions that complicate it. And a great percentage of the people who have died are in nursing homes or places that are particularly vulnerable to spreading very quickly.
But yeah. Sarah, I think we have to look at it this way. Do we run around as a country that is terrified of this, or do we just do the best we can to get on with our daily lives? And I think we have 2 perfect candidates, polar opposites. Biden, looks like he wears his mask to bed or
probably in the shower at least,
or I won't say it, but he wears his mask all the time. Whereas Trump seems more reasonable. And, I saw John Roberts on Fox the other day who said, he felt that Trump was very vigilant about, stay away, wait a minute, you're encroaching beyond my 6 feet kind of thing. Let's remember, this is the guy that when he first entered politics, he did not like to shake hands. He ran around with hand sanitizer all the time. I mean, I think he's appropriately afraid of the virus, but he doesn't let it rule and reign.
No, I don't believe that either. And if you look at the red states and how they're handling things, especially where I'm at in the middle of the heartland, you've got nothing but rural counties out here, not a lot of population, but people aren't scared. You have your elderly people and some millennials that may, leave their basement every now and again that wear masks. The majority of people around here won't do it. They refuse to do it. They refuse to be what they call sheeple. And so, if you're looking at demographics, the rural people in the silent majority areas are just saying, this is ridiculous. Let's get back to work. And the blue states and cities are, trying to keep people down. It's just bizarre.
Can anyone name one policy difference that Joe Biden would do with COVID that Trump wouldn't do? And don't say the mask mandate, because it's first, let's mandate a federal mask for everybody. Then let's not, it's unconstitutional. And then, maybe we should. I mean.
Well, Kamala Harris in the debate listed all the things that the Biden-Harris or Harris-Biden administration would do. And Of course, Mike Pence took the opportunity to say that sounds like plagiarism because that's exactly what we do. That's exactly what we're doing. And by the way, plagiarism is something that Joe Biden knows a little bit about, which was quite the broadside to start the debate. But of course, Kamala Harris had just said that the way that Trump treated COVID was essentially the biggest scandal in the history of American politics.
Biden said he would cure it if he was president, which if he can cure it when he's president, why can't he cure it now?
It's really about, it's the fear that is what they want, and actual substance, actual discussion about what they want to do doesn't really play into it. And how is that different from all the other things we've seen? The Trump-Russia investigation, the impeachment. It's all about the world's ending. Okay, tell me about it. They don't really have a lot to offer. So to me, this is just another ghost, another phantom, another Trump is blowing up the world thing, that if you examine it closely for 5 seconds, and they think the American voters won't do this. It's so insulting, actually, to the American voters. And this makes me angry because they still don't understand that Trump voters in 2016 knew what they were doing. They were specifically voting for certain policies and beliefs that are different from what the establishment had been doing since 1988. And they still, to this day, refuse to give Trump voters credit for that. It's like, oh, you were fooled by this demagogue. Oh, it's his personality. Oh, he's this wild man. No, they liked what he had to say. They will not give Trump voters that credit. And I think they're going to learn again what a mistake that is on November 3rd.
Bam, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was really going to add that in terms of the making a campaign issue out of the virus, out of COVID-19, the Democrats are in a position where they cannot afford the American people to get the perception, which would be a correct perception, that this virus really isn't as terrible as we were led to believe, because the more they can portray this virus, the worse they can make the virus seem, then the worse it appears Donald Trump has messed up, has failed to address it. Because if we suddenly all decide to pull our heads out of where they shouldn't be and realize that this virus is really not as bad as we were told, then at that point, we see that Trump's way of dealing with the virus, his response to it, was actually appropriate. Whereas if it's the Black Death, it's going to kill us all. I mean, just the other day, Donna Brazile said on Fox News, thousands of Americans are dying each and every day. And obviously she was implying that the virus was killing thousands of Americans each and every day, which is just not true. The worse they make the virus seem, the worse it appears Donald Trump has failed to respond to it.
Well, you know, guys, all this may come down to perspective. And I wonder if this business of Trump dropping in the polls with seniors is a result of all this hammering about COVID. You guys made some particularly good points. But when it comes right down to it, I guess we won't have long to find out if the leftist spin has worked. Election 2020, policy or personality? The question I'd like to throw out to our panel today is, will Americans vote on policy or will they vote on personality? It's clear by now that President Trump's character, his bombastic, optimistic, bold, and always controversial personality, rubs some people the wrong way. Sort of reminds me of the Slim Jims commercial, the old commercial that said you either love him or you hate him. Yet it's clear that his economic policies, his foreign policy, his policies on race, immigration, helping veterans, blah, blah, blah. You know, most Americans like those and approve of those. So, Joe, how do you see this shaping up? Are people willing to vote on the issues, or do they want to vote for the person they find least objectionable?
You know, personality plays a lot into it, and Trump has succeeded in coming up with his outsider personality that's still intact after 4 years in the White House. But I think this really comes down to Democrats, the establishment media, all of them, they still refuse to give Trump voters credit for they voted for this man for specific reasons. They want an end to the endless foreign wars. They want us to get tough with China on trade. They want to bring back manufacturing jobs. There are specific reasons why they voted for this man, and Democrats don't want to acknowledge that because they don't have any counter arguments to these issues. So all they have is Trump is evil, Trump is bad, and got to get rid of Trump. But in this election, it's not going to be, that will not be the deciding factor. The deciding factor will be, do the American people still support the reasons why they put this man into office 4 years ago? And all the blathering, all the gloom and doom is not going to change that, in my opinion.
I think you're absolutely right. I do not see anybody backing off, and this is coming from a perspective of being in the middle of the heartland. So I see people that remember why they voted in 2016, and they have not lost the taste for their president. So I don't see anything that the Democrats do to take away from his base. I mean, sometimes you got to hold your nose and listen to him say something weird, but after that's, done, said and done, what happens is people were happy. They were happy with the economy. They were happy with the policies. They were happy with him getting tough, doing his Trumplomacy. I don't see this coming down to, Joe Biden's so much more mild-mannered and Kamala Harris is so sweet. I don't see that happening at all.
I think that what we have to keep in mind, though, if we really think about it, is that going back through every election of our lifetimes, in virtually every case, the more likable candidate wins. Now, in 2016, you had Trump and Hillary, who were both sort of at record lows in terms of personal approval. But you go before that, Obama twice, Bush twice, Clinton twice, Bush 41, Reagan twice. And what you get is a series of more likable candidates than their opponents. So I don't want to be vacuous in terms of this analysis of policy versus personality, but personality does matter. But people like to think and will say that they vote on policy. I'm not sure that's always true, because sometimes it's just an impressionistic view of where the country is. And they may think a lot of the people that are voting for Joe Biden and have put him ahead in the polls are voting impressionistically, that he's kind of, he's going to be kinder, gentler. He's going to tone down the rhetoric. He's going to be a calm, steady, no drama, Obama type of hand at the wheel. And the question over these last 3 weeks is, how hard are people going to examine the actual proposition of Joe Biden, not as a cardboard cutout saying not Trump in the front, but an actual living human being who would become the leader of the free world? Is Joe Biden up to it? The voters better start thinking carefully about that.
I personally think those who are predicting a Biden victory are assuming that Biden is somehow more likable than Trump. I personally don't buy it. I mean, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm weird. I actually think Trump is an extremely likable guy.
We know you're weird, but we like you anyway.
Okay. I think with Biden, it's not that he's really not likable. I think they're just gambling on the fact that they believe he is, as a personality, he is less objectionable than Donald Trump. I mean, nobody is enthused about Biden. Nobody wants to, they always used to say, is this a guy you'd like to have a beer with? Nobody wants to have a beer with Joe Biden. Plus the fact, what is he going to do? Is he going to take his mask off to drink the beer? I don't think so.
No,
so anyway, but the thing is, he's not a likable character. People are not enthused about how much they like him. They're just hoping that he is perceived as less unlikable than Donald Trump. And I don't think that's the case.
Well, I understand what Tim and Graham are saying, and I agree to a large extent, but I would emphasize 2016 was a change campaign. It was different. And when you go back to the Reagan example, I thought 1980 was a change campaign. The American people knew what they were voting for when they voted for Ronald Reagan, and the American people knew in 2016 what they were voting for when they voted for Donald Trump. I have talked to people, working class Pennsylvania people, voted for Obama twice, and they voted for Trump in 2016, are voting again for him, and they know exactly why they're voting for him. When they talk about immigration, it's not just, oh yeah, we got to keep all these foreigners out. They're talking about jobs lost and seeing how communities have changed and how it's the worker is not getting a fair deal. And they like the fact that Donald Trump came along and started talking about these things when no other politician in the major parties were really talking about that before then. People know why they're voting for Donald Trump. It's not just personality. The issues do matter, and they do help him exceptionally.
But you're also saying sort of that people like his personality.
Yes, but I think that is not enough. That does not explain what happened in 2016. That, oh, he's this great guy, he was on TV. It's no, what is this guy saying that all these other people are saying? Do you remember that first debate with all those just wooden Republican politicians? I don't want to give them all their names, but they were just so cookie cutterish. And then this guy's there, and Megyn Kelly goes for the gotcha question. And yeah, it was personality, but it was also just like, this guy is different. This guy is not just reciting talking points. He's not scared. He's going to go up there and just say what he means. And to me, is that personality or is that issue? Well, it's both. But I think with Donald Trump, people wanted to see somebody say something and mean what they say. And that to me is issue-based, not personality. And please, somebody disagree with me. I'd love to hear it.
You're kind of spot on, but people also embrace the fact that here's a guy who's going to fight for us. He's not going to kiss the ass of our enemies. He's going to fight for America. He's going to put America first. And so that bit of, the pugilist in Trump, always raising a fist, and people embrace that. They're like, yeah, somebody's finally going to do something and stop being some tight ass suit wearing nerd.
It is striking, absolutely striking, how little effort the left and the Democrats have exerted in trying to understand the Trump vote from 2016. They simply condemned it, and they have written off every Trump supporter as some sort of, hayseed who drools out the side of his mouth and doesn't know any better. But, Lisa, you and I went to a Trump rally in just past Thanksgiving in 2015 because we were curious to know, who are these Trump people? What is this Trump revolution? Are these people really all, farmers with pitchforks? And we were struck by the diversity and the normalcy or normality or whatever you want to put it, the normal nature of the crowd with everyday Americans. And then we went into the parking lot, which is always the best place to find out sort of the socioeconomic status of the person who's performing inside. And we saw almost nothing but high-end cars. And now people expected pickup trucks, all pickup trucks to the Trump rally. But in fact, the only pickup trucks that we saw, Lisa, were ones that were practically brand new and probably worth over $30,000, $40,000. So they've made no attempt to understand the Trump voter. They've simply condemned them. And I think that's to their detriment. They just don't understand how anybody could possibly have voted for Donald Trump.
Well, this goes back actually to Hillary Clinton's infamous basket of deplorables remark. That was just a monumental miscalculation on her part to say that. But of course, her supporters loved it. But that sums up, just what you were saying there, Tim. Yeah, you're right. I agree, because it is summed up in exactly what Hillary Clinton did. She dismissed Trump supporters like wholesale, absolutely just painted them all with the same brush. They're a bunch of uneducated backwoods hicks who don't know any better. And of course, that nothing could be further from the truth, in fact.
All right, but I'm kind of concerned that people want boring now. And if Joe Biden is nothing, he's boring. Look, when we saw the Pence Harris debate, everyone was like, I want to debate on the issues. And I thought, yeah, well, this is television. And guess what? After 15 minutes, you all are going to be surfing around for 20 reruns of 24. I mean, people don't like to talk about the issues because they're boring. And Mike Pence, bless his heart, he is, as Tim, you put perfectly last night when you were on another program, as they say, on another network. You said Pence was the yin to Trump's yang. He's humble, he's very
calm,
disciplined, yes, and calm. And Trump is none of those things. He's bombastic and wild, but this is TV and people like that. But now I'm wondering if they've had kind of enough. And so I'm concerned that voters aren't paying enough attention to the policies and platforms of these candidates. Biden and Trump have very different views on fracking, very different views on climate change, taxation, the economy. Biden's trying to tack to the center, but God, he's got Kamala Harris as a running mate. How's he going to do that?
But, I think this was a major, major reason why I thought last night's debate was very important with Pence and Harris. Trump, say what you want, he comes across as authentic. He says what he means and means what he says. That's the way he comes across to his people. Can you win the way Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing? It's there. We have the footage for a full calendar year from early 2019 to 2020. They were both saying, we're getting rid of fracking. Fracking's gone, sucking up to the progressive left. And can you go on national TV in a debate, the vice presidential debate, highest stakes, look the people in the eye and say, it is a fact. Let me repeat, it is a fact. He is not going to get rid of fracking. And to say it in like a smug kind of, I'm being a rock of Gibraltar here kind of way, when you are contradicting what you said for an entire year. To me, this is issues here. This is not personality. Can you make that kind of 180 and not turn off the American people? I think it's going to have serious repercussions, and all the personality, all the calm, sober, whatever is not going to change that. That was a major, major mistake, I thought. Just being so strident about it was a major mistake by her last night.
Lest we forget, Kamala Harris was a disaster in her own presidential campaign. I mean, people really didn't respond to her personality at all, a personality which, and I don't say this often, rivals that of Hillary Clinton in terms of lack of likability, the snarkiness, the smirk little smiles at all the wrong times during the Pence debate. I mean, it was not a good look at all. And we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, she absolutely bombed out of her own presidential campaign, and she wasn't some long shot challenger either. She entered the race to great fanfare, had the biggest crowd of anybody making an announcement. And after, other than calling Joe Biden effectively a racist, she had no moments during the campaign. She was all over the place. One day she was a prosecutor. The next day she was a social justice warrior. Her personality was kind of repulsive, especially during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, where she did not distinguish herself at all, to say the least. We'll see what she does with Amy Coney Barrett. But, Kamala Harris hasn't been resurrected as this sudden dynamic candidate. She was a miserable flop on her own, and she really got significantly outpointed by Mike Pence.
All I want to do is throw in, I hate to stoop to this level, but Lisa, when you were earlier on, when you were talking about the vice presidential debate, you were looking for a descriptive word for the vice president. And I just want to throw in the obvious word you were looking for was pensive.
Oh, very nice.
I have to admit, I'm not a Mike Pence fan. I just don't think he's a make America great guy. He's the perfect vice president. He's the ideal sidekick. But I didn't think he was capable of that performance last night. He was in control from the beginning. Harris is supposed to be the pit bull, the attack dog. She never for a single second came close to laying a glove on the guy. And it was because he was so smooth and he made it look easy. I never really thought he was this fantastically talented politician, but geez, he really opened my eyes. He put on a great performance last night. He really did.
Mike Pence is truly one of the most underestimated politicians in Washington, D.C.
So.
in my view.
I guess I underestimated him.
Well, it didn't hurt that, he was facing someone in Kamala Harris who has literally no depth. Her academic credentials are thin at best. She flips positions on everything. She never goes into substance beyond talking points. All of her points were memorized stuff about like Abraham Lincoln didn't fill a Supreme Court vacancy 27 days before the election 170 years ago or whatever it was. It's just all memorized talking points. I mean, this is a person with no real core principles. And I think we saw that on display in the vice presidential debate.
Yeah, I know I'm talking too much here, but I'd like to get your opinions on this. I wrote in the article, I thought it was very interesting, the dynamic. Pence was the perfect foil to Harris's personality. His whole demeanor brought out to me all of her weaknesses. It's like, okay, you're going to be the tough gal. He's not going to get flapped by that. He's going to be totally serene. Okay, you said your I'm speaking thing. Now say something. He was just serene and calm and waiting for that. And she had nothing to say. So my question to you all is, why didn't the Democrats see this coming when they chose her as the candidate 2 months ago? Do we really want to put her up against Mike Pence one-on-one in a debate? I thought the dynamics, it was never going to be good for her. She was never going to successfully be able to take on what Mike Pence is. And what do you all think about that?
Nothing the Democrats have done has made any sense.
That's true.
For 4 years. So who knows what they're going to do next. But, you can't follow them. You just don't, they don't vet people. They don't look deep. They continue to think if they, pull the pin on the grenade and just lob it, it's going to work. And it doesn't always work. And it didn't work last night. In fact, everybody today was talking about the fly on his head, because what else was there to say other than she lost really badly? The fly. Seriously.
Yeah. I think there was insufficient gravity attached to this vice presidential debate because traditionally, for example, people, how many of you remember the debate between Mike Pence and Tim Kaine from 2016? I barely remember that it even happened. Vice presidential debates are just usually window dressing. There's a few memorable lines like "You're no Jack Kennedy" that was uttered, by Lloyd Benson to Dan Quayle. But as a whole, vice presidential debates traditionally are meaningless. But this one is not, because in both instances, with Biden because of his evident cognitive decline, and with Trump because he's down with the COVID, you've got a greater chance than ever that not only one, but either one of these vice presidential candidates is more likely to ascend to the presidency without being elected than any vice presidential candidates in history, I think.
Joe, here's why, in my humble opinion, I don't think they were thinking about the optics between Harris taking the stage or to Pence, or they were thinking, look, it only happens once. And what we need to do is play identity politics, and we need a Black woman. And so they just went after that. And they vetted, 4 or 5 Black women and felt that she fit the bill and figured, well, she can muddle through pretty well last night. And frankly, I think she did muddle through pretty well. I mean, Pence landed his punches, the plagiarism, but most people aren't even old enough to remember Neil Kinnock's speech and that Joe Biden plagiarized it, or that he was at the bottom of his class, or any of that. If you have to search way down in Google, even find that kind of stuff. So, and Pence landed a few punches when he said, you're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to the facts. Good stuff. But again, it was more important to the Democrats to have a Black woman than the optics of one evening. That's just my.
Absolutely. I agree.
I agree with that part of what you're saying. I do not agree that she put on any kind of a good performance. I thought she was really and truly atrocious. And she was atrocious throughout the Democratic primary process. As Tim said, why did they think anything was going to be different? They saw what she had to offer. She couldn't outclass the likes of Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro. She didn't separate herself from that kind of mediocrity. And sure. Everybody was writing about this. Everyone was saying this. It's the March of the Turtles. It's a bunch of minnows. And this is such a boring process. And then they go and pick her. I just can't. I understand what Lisa's saying, and I guess that's the reason. But do they have any foresight whatsoever? I just can't believe it.
The March of the Turtles? The March of the Turtles. That is really good.
Well, they boxed themselves into a corner. I mean, Biden boxed himself into a corner because he said he would pick a woman at any cost. And then he later basically said he would pick a woman of color at any cost. And when you narrow the list down of people who can be passed off as ready for the Oval Office, Kamala Harris was alone on that list.
All right, Graham, once again, you get the last word.
I would really love to make this segment even more entertaining than it's been by completely disagreeing with somebody, but I have to agree with you, Lisa. I believe that the selection of Kamala Harris as Joe Biden's running mate was based on nothing beyond the fact that she is a woman of color. That's all there is to it.
Real quick, do you think Obama made that call?
If you're asking me, Joe, personally, no, I don't think he had anything to do with it, actually. Okay. I think it was, I think that's all the Democrats were focused on. I mean, they've got Joe Biden up there, an old white man, and they all knew that they had to have a woman of color as his running mate. I think it was probably a unanimous thought.
Well, I wonder which demographic group, the personality ones or the policy ones, who will put the issues first and who will put the policy first, who knows? Ultimately, the demographics on election day will prove to be fascinating. With the 24/7 news cycle coming at us like a hurricane, it can be challenging to separate the noise from what matters. We've got a lot going on in the American political stratosphere. Amy Coney Barrett, the declassification of documents regarding Russiagate, the president suffering from COVID-19. I've asked our esteemed panel to choose one thing, what they think matters, and open that up for discussion. Tim, let's begin with you. So we're seeing some stories being ignored by the leftist media and others that are hyped. But with all the chatter and craziness, what's on your front burner?
Well, what's on my front burner is the fact that the American people, I don't think, have realized yet that when they're voting for Joe Biden, if they're voting for Joe Biden, they're essentially voting for Kamala Harris because very few, if any, people believe that Biden could make it through one whole term. Nobody believes he could make it through two. So the chances of Kamala Harris ascending to the presidency without even being elected to it, I think are much greater than people even realize, which is why I think there was such importance, should have been attached to the vice presidential debate, not as a typical VP running mate debate that doesn't matter, but as a real display of what you're going to get if you elect Joe Biden, because it's all about what's behind the curtain, because Joe Biden is a sort of a pleasant front man for an agenda that nobody knows exactly who's pulling the strings, exactly who's making the calls. So I think people really need to pay a whole lot closer attention to Kamala Harris as something more, much more than an appendage of Joe Biden.
Well, I can tell you the people in the flyover states are terrified of her, and they already think that. They're not looking at him as presidential material. They're looking at her, and they are fully aware that she's, de facto the presidential candidate. So you may have a different point of view if you live in a large city or a highly populated area, or if you're on the East or West Coast. But all of the people in the middle are like, oh, heck no. They're fully aware that she will be the president. He won't make it. And they're fully aware of that.
I'm fairly convinced that actually Joe Biden, if he were to win in November, I am absolutely convinced that he will resign from the presidency in January of 2024.
Because of his cognitive decline, or he's just tired, or he just need to get Trump out? I'm just doing everybody a favor.
I think he refers to himself all the time as a transitional president. And I think he'll do that. I think basically he'll get to the beginning of 2024 and he will announce, for personal reasons, who knows, wants to spend more time with his wife, grandchildren, whatever.
I don't think it'll take that long.
Hand over to Kamala right at that point, and then she will be the president and run for re-election, essentially.
Yeah, good luck with her re-election chances.
Well, yeah.
It's very interesting what Sarah was saying about people in flyover country. I'm starting to watch all these electoral maps that show a Biden path to victory. And some of them are sort of convincing in a way, but they all involve him literally sweeping the Rust Belt, maybe not Ohio, but taking Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, all these states Hillary struggled with 4 years ago. So, okay, if that has to happen for this man to win, why the heck is Kamala Harris the vice presidential candidate? She doesn't add a single thing that's going to help attract voters in those areas. And, Scranton Joe only goes so far, like you said. So many people realize that Kamala Harris in many ways is the real candidate here. She's a California progressive. They have to win these working class states. This isn't a good formula for them.
But let me just say this, Joe, nobody plays better class warfare than Joe Biden. I mean, he's been playing this Scranton violin for a long time. And, it's interesting. Trump, they're both millionaires, but Trump is presumably the more wealthier of the two. But Trump has a way of capturing the people. And his message is much more populist, whereas Biden comes off, I think, is much more elitist.
Well, I mean, this whole Scranton Joe thing is an absurdity. The man left Scranton, Pennsylvania when he was 11 years old, and he's been ensconced in Washington, D.C. for 47 years as a poster child for the political establishment, the very thing that people voted against in 2016. The only real difference between Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton is the personality. But if you look at their policies, they're pretty much exactly the same. Biden now presents as more leftist because he has bowed to the left. And Kamala Harris, you know what? Kamala Harris is a product of Joe Biden's weakness, because he was too weak not to commit early on. Oh, yes, I'll take a woman. And then he was boxed in. And then he was way too weak to resist the idea that he had to pick a person of color. Maybe he forgot that he'd also said he was going to pick a woman, because then he was left with women of color. It had to be the smallest field of candidates for vice president ever presented to a presidential candidate of his own making.
I mean, yeah, everything you say is right there. And what amazes me is this 47-year theme. I don't think people realize how powerful that is. That is never going to lose its punch. This guy was a United States senator before Godfather 2 came out. The movies, that famous movie that we've all grown up with. He was in the United States Senate before that movie was made. I mean, you can come up with all kinds of fun examples of this. This guy is a lifer. He's really at an age where he should be retired, relaxing, enjoying his grandchildren, whatever, and he's clinging on to this thing. That alone is such a turnoff to voters and people. And then they see this vice presidential candidate that he chose, who is another product of machine politics, Willie Brown's California machine, and she has always come across as a ladder climber. It's always the next step with her. So she didn't even think, hey, is me being on this Joe Biden ticket, good or bad for me? It's another step up the ladder. Of course I'm going to do that. So you have this resume, swamp resume candidacy against this brash populist outsider who just says the first thing that comes, to mind. And I think it's kind of crazy that we're all saying, oh, gee, Trump is saying ridiculous things, he's going to lose. These people are fossils, and they've been around forever. I don't see how Trump's personality is going to minimize how damaging that is in a country that's just dying for real change.
All right, let's move on to another one thing. Who's got a one thing that matters?
I got a one thing, and this is not in the news anymore. And I want to give a shout out to Tyler County, Texas, who actually had the cojones to sue Netflix for that ridiculous movie Cuties. They're the only ones that have come out and are putting on the gloves and trying to take this Netflix junk down. And I think that's impressive. You can't even, our Congress wouldn't do anything. You had a couple of barking here and there, but this is a horrible, horrible sexualization of 11-year-old girls. I don't understand how it's even remotely still on Netflix, but it is.
Well, it's interesting because where is the left on this? I mean, they are the keepers of the Me Too. They are the keepers of the, women being over-sexualized. Where is the leftist voice on this? Somebody, please tell me.
The left is not interested in this anymore. The Me Too movement effectively ended when Tara Reade came forward and presented her charges against Joe Biden, which the elite big corporate media, big box medias, as Joe likes to call them, they ignored it. They downplayed it. They said it wasn't possible. They couldn't find any record of it in the National Archives. And have you noticed that since then, the hashtag Me Too has rarely, if ever, been invoked? It all ended with Tara Reade, because if what she said turned out to be true, that was the end of Joe Biden.
And Cuties was hailed before this whole scandal came down. It played at Sundance, Robert Redford's artsy film festival out there in Utah, where all the, all of the smart progressives who think so much of themselves go. They love that movie. They hailed that movie. So again, this kind of points out to me what I think is interesting is this urban rural, for lack of a better word, divide. If you're in this urbanite worldview, you want to wear your mask, you support the experts on the coronavirus, you think movies like Cuties are really groundbreaking and wonderful, and then you've got this other America saying, oh my God, they're supporting child pornography, they're making us wear masks. How are we going to put these two worlds together? The divide just keeps getting starker by the day. And I think the arrogance of the cosmopolitan urbanite left, it just gets more. I mean, when you're defending child pornography, I just don't see how you alienate yourselves more from the mainstream of the American people.
Okay, but let's not forget, these are the same people that are acting like Amy Coney Barrett is going to Jonestown to drink the Kool-Aid because she's Roman Catholic.
Well, the problem with Amy Coney Barrett for the left is that she's the worst possible person, not just because she's conservative, not just because she's Catholic, but she practices a brand of Catholicism that includes what you call the spiritual gifts, which includes, yes, speaking in tongues. I don't know that she speaks in tongues, but this is for the left. In addition to losing the court for a generation with Amy Coney Barrett, they get the worst possible thing, which is a Catholic and an evangelical rolled into one on the court, making decisions on things like abortion. And I mean, there's no understating how panicked
Ruth Bader Ginsburg died!
and apoplectic the left is. In a sense, what I think I said on a previous show here, that, this is, you could argue that Amy Coney Barrett getting on the court, giving a 6-3 conservative majority is more important than getting Donald Trump reelected for conservatives.
All righty. On that note, who's got another thing that matters?
Well, my thing that matters actually is one of my favorite subjects to write about, as it turns out, the Trump-Russia collusion circus. And right now we have ongoing investigations, at least one ongoing Department of Justice investigation into this, led by a Mr. John Durham, a prosecutor out of Connecticut. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, the election is coming up now. Nothing has been resolved there, with the exception of one single FBI attorney. No indictments have been handed out. This thing is still unresolved. Trump supporters are absolutely screaming, tearing their hair out in outrage that nothing as yet, no justice as they see it, has yet been meted out. And here we are at the election. Now, if Joe Biden were to win, we know that this investigation is going to be killed immediately. I mean, it's done. The whole thing is done. It's going to be shut down wholesale. And I wonder if that happens, what the reaction of the American people, or at least those Americans who are on the right side of the political spectrum, how do they react to that? I mean, I can imagine that the level of outrage is going to be insane. But at the same time, if Trump wins the election, then at that point, and I think in many respects, he doesn't have to worry about running for re-election again. I believe we're going to see a different Trump anyway in his second term. I think he's really going to take the gloves off when it comes to things like immigration. But also with this investigation into the what appears to be, from all the evidence that's coming out, the utter failure and deceit as well on the part of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, possibly the Central Intelligence Agency, and maybe with certain Department of Justice officials. I believe things are going to get extremely uncomfortable if Donald Trump wins a second term. Things are going to get extremely uncomfortable for the likes of James Comey, John Brennan, and various other characters, Peter Strzok, and certain other people.
I can't breathe, defund the police. And then you have the FBI is sacred. The CIA, we must trust and believe the CIA. And it just blows my mind that they can do those two things. Doesn't faze them at all. It seems like the most normal thing in the world. Crush the cop on the street and defend these deep state operatives that are trying to, who basically, I mean, we can say they took on a coup against the sitting president of the United States.
Nobody is paying attention to this because we're so close to the election. And, they needed to come out with this stuff earlier, and they needed to pound it. Now it's just looking like partisan nonsense, and it isn't. It isn't partisan nonsense. It is. There are serious problems with what happened.
The thing that is, to me, crushingly disappointing is that, I have people ask me over these last year or so, when do you think Barr is going to come out with his findings? When's the Durham investigation going to be wrapped up? When are we going to learn something? When are there going to be indictments? When is he going to file some charges? When are we going to get a report? And my answer was always the same thing. I said, well, let me tell you this. If anybody is willing to take this on, anybody in Washington is willing to take this on and get the information and the truth out to the American people, it's Bill Barr. And Bill Barr has failed to do that. 16 and a half months into his investigation with John Durham, the famously tough prosecutor, what do we have? We have nothing. And what good does it do for the voters to find out after this election what was done to spy on the Trump campaign by the Obama Justice Department before the 2016 election? How can anybody make the case that the American people should not be given a full report of what happened, and indictments probably as well, so they can understand the gravity of this? This was an attempt to overthrow a presidency after it had previously been an attempt to submarine a presidential candidate who was the enemy of the sitting president. This is un-American.
Can't argue with that. But then there's that little thing called COVID that dominated 24/7 the news cycle since February. So
he chose not to. And that's extremely disappointing, because it says to me, you know what, no matter how hard you push, when you push up against the deep state, against the permanent bureaucracy in Washington, you can only get so far. You're not going to get to the whole truth, because if Bill Barr isn't willing to do it, nobody is.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I also tend to agree. I think it would have been very easy for, okay, the investigation's still ongoing. That's fair enough. Sometimes investigations of this scale could take, any number of additional months from now. But I think Bill Barr, at least they have had they've seen enough of the jigsaw puzzle by now to at least maybe have been able to put out some kind of interim report, like a progress report to the American people. And I do believe that possibly Bill Barr made the decision not to do that because it would be perceived as too political in the run-up to the election. But I honestly believe, personally, my view is that he should have said, I don't actually care. That perception does not matter to me. We're coming up to the man who was the target of this hoax, of this conspiracy, of this scheme. The man who was the target of it is running for re-election. It is only fair that the American people have an update on what we are discovering about what happened to him 4 years ago.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, so now has everybody done their one more thing?
I don't think I've done one.
Okay, go for it, Joe.
Well, I thought it was a very important speech, her closing arguments for Joe Biden that Michelle Obama gave the other day. She played the race card to the hilt. It was mean, it was vicious, but I think more important was it destroys this idea that Biden is cruising to victory. You don't bang a hornet's nest like that if your guy is cruising. They know what's going on here. They know that this race is close. I'd say Trump is comfortably leading, but that was a telling thing. She really took it to a whole new level of just, Black people cowering in fear in this, in Trump's racially hostile America. And you don't do that if you're feeling like you're winning a race. I think they know they're losing. And I think Michelle Obama is saying that absolutely brings that home.
I really appreciate those comments, Joe, because I think there are a lot of conservatives who are losing heart. These polls are starting to get to them. And maybe that's the idea. They figure, well, let me just stay home. What's the point? Biden's got an insurmountable lead.
They didn't stay home in 2016. And hell, Hillary Clinton was winning with 72% of the vote. So I don't think anybody even buys the polls anymore. I think it's a tired argument that is bandied about by big box media. And I think the real electorate is going, yeah, maybe, but I don't think so.
Well, I'm going to be just incredibly insufferable here and say that actually I think you are both right in a way there. I think Sarah is right that it may just not matter to conservatives to Republicans to Trump supporters, it may not matter what the polls say. They're just going to come out anyway. You know, that silent majority that we all hear about, and I'm sure we all agree certainly does exist, is going to make their voices heard. But at the same time, I do tend to think that Lisa hit upon a point about these endless polls, just an avalanche of polls showing Biden ahead everywhere all the time, and you know, his lead growing in some places where it was close before. And I do believe that there is some kind of collective effort underway to just beat conservatives, like almost like beat them into submission, just smash them over the head with this notion that you're done, it's all over, you're going to lose, you have no chance. So but as coming back to Sarah's point, I'm not sure that's going to work, but I do believe it's a tactic.
Hear, hear, well said. All right, my one thing that matters is the virtual debate. President Trump is saying he doesn't want to do the virtual debate. I'd like him to change his mind. You know, anytime there's an opportunity to go one-on-one with Joe Biden, and this time if he actually lets Biden talk, you know, I think he will end up tangling himself in a knot. So I would really ask President Trump, please do the debate, Mr. President.
You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't see why he needs to fear. Let Joe Biden have a teleprompter. He's still going to come up with 20 or 30 gaffes. What's the problem? I think Trump knows something we don't know about just how staged this was going to be and how much it was going to help Biden. Because I'm with you 100%. I think he should do it. But if he knows something, because they're really pulling out all the stops for this guy. Chris Wallace was his tag team partner in that first debate. What would they do with a totally controlled studio environment for this guy? So in that regard, I understand it. And I'm just saying, I think he knows something we don't know.
Well, I mean, in the category of half a loaf is better than none, if he is as behind in the polls as all these public polls are showing, it's a huge mistake for him not to participate, for the simple reason that 70 million people watched the first debate, and now he has a chance to make up for his subpar performance, shall we say, in the first debate, and change the subject completely here, even if it's imperfect, even if Biden cheats, even if he's got an earpiece and he's got a teleprompter, or he's got someone actually stating the words for him through an electronic voice. It doesn't matter. It puts him out in front of the American people. He's only got 2 more shots at this. And by passing this one up, there's no guarantee at all there will even be a third debate. And if there is, what's to say they're going to say anything different? They're going to call it a virtual debate, which means Trump will drop out again, which means between now and November 3rd, he doesn't have a national forum. He doesn't have a forum on national TV in front of all the American people. I think that's too big to pass up. But if you believe what Joe said, which is these polls are wrong and Trump is really winning, then he really does know something that we don't know.
Anybody else on the virtual debate?
I tend to think that, I just think the bottom line is that Trump should take what he can get. I think he should agree to do the debate in any fashion. I think he can make a huge talking point, especially if, you know, we're going to know when we watch that debate, if it's held virtually, it's going to be obvious if it is, in fact, as staged as perhaps we all suspect it might be, and perhaps as staged as President Trump himself thinks it's going to be. I think it's going to shine through, and I think Trump could then make a huge issue about that and just go back again and again and point to that debate and say, look how set up it was. But I also think, on the other hand, Trump should actually say, look, you know, I'm going to agree to the virtual debate format, but I just want it known, I just want it on the record that I believe we should be doing this next debate in person. And I think it's a complete joke that we're doing it virtually. But nevertheless, I'm going to go along with it.
One thing we know for sure, Mike Pence wasn't wearing an earwig, because if he was, somebody would have told him he had a fly on his head.
I always thought the Saturday Night Live's going to have a field day with this. They probably have a thing with, like some giant spider landing on Pence's head, and he won't know it, and then he'll jump off, and then something bigger will get on, and then it'll be some kind of a creepy monster on his head. I'm predicting that's what Saturday Night Live does with that.
Do we know that the fly wasn't actually the earwig? That was that was what he was getting his messages through the fly.
Good conspiracy theory. Very good.
All right. Funny how so much.
I don't think the fly had anything to do with anything.
Well, funny how so much matters these days. Perhaps that's why that tired phrase, "This is the most important election of our lifetime," is actually real this year. Sometimes it feels like we're living in an ADHD world that has so much going on. It's hard to focus on things that really do matter, but I'm personally glad we did. The loony leftist clips contest. So many outrageous things being said on the left, so little time. Who will get the coveted C5 prize? Details on that later. But first, let's see what fun is in store for us. You know those clips where we're not sure whether we want to laugh or cry? Graham, I know you spent all day working on yours.
Well, Lisa, by way of brief introduction of mine, all I'll say that this is MSNBC once again playing the Trump-Hitler analogy.
This, to me, looked like a rally from the early 30s comparing to Hitler. And, that's something you cautiously do, because we can use the word fascist, but then when you go Hitler, you can't, everybody starts to go. Basically, you had a destruction of the belief in the free press. You have creating an other, whether it's Muslims, whether it's Mexicans, and then you have the destruction of free elections. What is the difference between Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump? I'm not saying there's a Holocaust, but...
So, first of all, with that, I hate that just terrible ending. Oh, I'm not saying there's a Holocaust. That was just so awful. Because, of course, we must remember this. I like to turn, when we get these Hitler analogies, Trump is Hitler, so-and-so is Hitler, whatever. I like to turn it on its head. And I like to remind people that if you are comparing Donald Trump to Hitler, then you are literally saying that nothing Hitler did was any worse than what Donald Trump has done. So, and to me, that's a pretty awful thing to think. But anyway, got a couple of points about this particular clip. First of all, I really dislike it when people, in their attempts to sound worldly and sophisticated and educated,
Erudite,
if you like, erudite as well, that they mispronounce very simple to pronounce words. And here's what I'm getting at here. Hitler was Austrian, and another famous Austrian who wasn't anywhere near as bad as Hitler was Arnold Schwarzenegger. And did Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator character in his famous movie, did he say, "I'll be back"? No, he didn't. He said, "I'll be back." And that's because in the German language, or as Barack Obama might have said, in the Austrian language, they pronounce their A's, and I'm actually a German speaker, by the way, they pronounce their A's kind of with a long A. And now Hitler may have been a lot of things. He was a sociopath with possibly multiple personality disorders. He was a mass murderer. There's nothing nice you can say about Hitler, but for all the things he was, what he wasn't was an Adolf. He wasn't an Adolf. There's no such person in history as Adolf Hitler. It's Adolf Hitler. And if you're going to pronounce his name Adolf Hitler, then you're just showing that you're completely ignorant, in fact, of history. So the man may have been a monster, but at least let's pronounce his name right. Anyway, but the second point here is what are they comparing to a Nazi party rally? We see a shot of a bunch of people all standing close to each other, looking in the same direction. So that's a Nazi party rally, is it? Well, how about the audience at any sporting event, in any sporting arena, whether it's basketball, football, any other sporting event, you've got a bunch of people all standing close together, looking in the same direction. So does that remind you of a Nazi party rally? How about another example of people standing all looking in the same direction, an inner city bus stop at 8 o'clock in the morning? Does that remind you of a Nazi Party rally? I would also say perhaps we could compare a Joe Biden campaign rally to a Nazi Party rally. But of course, he doesn't have enough people standing there looking in the same direction. In fact, he has less people than at the bus stop, in the inner city bus stop at 8 o'clock in the morning. But, you know, this particular analogy with this group of people standing there, you know, presumably listening to Trump speak, in what universe does that resemble a Nazi Party rally?
Let me just say that I think there is actually a campaign going on in the leftist media to make some sort of resemblance between Trump and Adolf Hitler. I woke up the other day and there was a breaking news thing on there, and they had a picture of Trump coming out of Walter Reed, and he had his hand up in a funny way. You know, he was either saluting or coming down from the salute, but the way they had him was kind of like this, and it was on BuzzFeed. And I said, "What does that look like to you?" And he said, "It looks like a Nazi salute." So,
which proves that he's a Nazi.
Right.
Slam dunk.
I think there's some kind of campaign going on. I really do.
Well, they had him being Mussolini because he was standing on a balcony.
Right.
Got back to the White House. So he's Trump, Mussolini.
What's delicious about that clip is the end part where he goes, "Well, there's no Holocaust, but," and so that when you have an incomplete sentence like that, you sort of like to speculate on how he would have ended it. And I think Donnie Deutsch, who hates Trump with a passion I have rarely seen. He was a competitor of his in New York business for years. I think what he meant was there's no Holocaust, but Trump would really like one. I think that's really, if he completed the sentence, that's what he would have said, that Trump is so despicable and so evil that if he had his way, if there was some way in a constitutional republic that he could create a Holocaust, he would do it.
All right, next up, Joe.
Well, my clip is that noted voice of reason in the dominant big box media, Don Lemon, or is it Lemon? I'm not even going to try to pronounce
Lemon.
Let the clip for itself. He's just being the voice of sanity once again.
We're going to have to blow up the entire system. You're going to have to get rid of the Electoral College because the people...
I don't see it.
Because the minority in this country decides who the judges are and they decide who the president is.
But you need a constitutional amendment to do that.
And if Joe Biden wins, Democrats can stack the courts.
I mean, when Chris Cuomo is trying to talk you down from the ledge, you know you've got problems. This wasn't Don Lemon being seditious. This was Don Lemon being a diva hysteric, you know, which is what his trade and craft is. So, you know, this is what he does. There's no seriousness to it. There's no substance. How does CNN go on with this? I mean, whatever shreds of journalistic integrity you have left, you're just burning down. And why don't they understand this doesn't hurt Donald Trump? You know, destroying your own professional reputation really doesn't hurt this guy.
The remarkable thing about Don Lemon, in addition to the fact that he's the most appropriately named man on television, is that you'd think with this guy who is completely off the edge, that he'd sort of be crying into the darkness to CNN's ever diminishing audience. But in fact, it was he who was like the first voice from the left, 3-4 weeks ago, who said, you know, there's some trouble with all this violence in these cities. The Democrats, Joe Biden's going to have to deal with that. It was 2 days later, or 3 days, something like that, that Biden rushed to Pittsburgh to appear in an empty warehouse to say he's not against fracking and that Trump is lying when he said that he is. And then you can roll out, I rolled out on Liberty Nation Radio 8 separate sound bites of Biden promising to get rid of fracking. But he thinks, as we've discussed here, that he can just get up there and say, it's a lie to say I'm against it, when the video footage exists of him saying it over and over and over again in different places. So as hapless and pathetic as Don Lemon is on CNN, he's being listened to by the Biden campaign.
Well, let me just say this. Wasn't he the one that said they have to come out and speak out against this violence? And like 15 minutes later,
yes,
the Biden campaign, they put like this tweet out, or Biden went on, some basement camera or something. I mean, they not only listen to him, I think they really are taking their, strategical cues from him.
That's why we're calling it the media wing of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Really quickly, has anybody noticed that NBC is becoming CNN? I mean,
yes.
biased. NBC's gone crazy now. They've gone full or CNN crazy. I think that's some kind of development there.
I said it's almost like it's a virus.
Yeah. Okay. Who's got one more? Who's got a funny clip?
I do.
Speak now, Mr. Tim.
Okay, well, let me just set this up a little. It doesn't need a lot of setup, but it's very useful because it rolls a number of important things into one humorous, hysterical, really, clip. And it's from 1988 with our favorite Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show, talking about Joe Biden running for president in 1988. And by the way, that was already 15 years into his career in 1988, the height of Johnny Carson. And he made light of a problem which led to Biden having to leave the campaign suddenly.
On the political scene, one of the Democratic candidates is Senator Joseph Biden. Have you seen the problem he's been having? He went around and made a speech. And apparently, he quoted I think it was a British politician, took his speech and kind of paraphrased it as his own. And then the press got on him, and then he was charged also with taking part of Bobby Kennedy's speeches. And Biden says, not to worry, he reassured his staff. He said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
I mean, quote, that's just quintessential Johnny Carson. But, here's one of the things. Until Mike Pence brought it up with a broadside at the very start of the presidential debate or vice presidential debate, after Kamala Harris said that Trump's treatment of the COVID pandemic was the biggest crime in American history. But Pence brought up the plagiarism idea, which Johnny Carson made light of there. And that's another one of those things from Biden's past that nobody wants to bring up. I mean, it cost him, a chance to win the presidential nomination for the Democratic Party in 1988. Of course, he bombed again in 2008, dropped out after one contest. But it brings to mind both the fact of how long Joe Biden's been around, what a joke he was from the time he ran for president, and how this guy who's kind of a laugh line now suddenly is supposedly, according to the polls, on the precipice of becoming the leader of the free world. Think about that.
Well, here's the thing about that. I mean, you have to drill down on Google several pages before you can. I mean, even if you do a search, Biden plagiarism, it's like they're burying it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these people weren't alive in '88, so they don't remember.
Watching that clip, I just feel bad for all of us when you realize that you had a real pro like Johnny Carson on TV back then, and the absolute clowns that we're stuck with now. These bear types, I don't even have a TV anymore, and I don't miss it at all. So, all those names, Jimmy Kimmel, all these fools, and they take their shots at Trump, and there's no guile. There's nothing intelligent about it. That was a pretty intelligent joke by Johnny Carson. He didn't dumb it down for his audience. It was good, and it was historically based. And TV used to be actually pretty good once upon a time.
We should probably make clear, in case you didn't, for those who don't know, that we have nothing to fear, but fear itself was one of the most famous things that Franklin Delano Roosevelt said in trying to sort of lift the country out of depression. So it was, at least back then, a very familiar with a lot of people, not as familiar now, but that sort of just to bring that to completion.
Graham?
Well, I was just going to say that, something that speaks to both the, maybe this is unfair of me, maybe this is judgmental, but I have a feeling I'm along the right, I'm going in the right direction. Speaking to the possibly the ignorance of an audience of perhaps Jimmy Kimmel's show, and also speaking to what you alluded to, Lisa, about people just not being aware of Joe Biden's plagiarism scandal because it's now buried so deep. All I was going to say, Joe, is that, you mentioned Jimmy Kimmel. If he had told that same joke on his show, there would have been a deathly silence. They would have needed canned laughter because they would have got none from the audience, because not only would the audience have not even understood what he was talking about with Joe Biden's plagiarism, but they wouldn't even understand the funny, the joke of him saying, then we have nothing to fear but fear itself, because they wouldn't even know where that comes from either.
My clip is relatively short, and I will be short on the introduction. This woman has just recently come off of a really snarky vice presidential debate with the current vice president, and he slapped her around just enough, but this might be a relevant clip today.
And how do you go from being such a passionate opponent on such bedrock principles for you, and now you guys seem to be pals?
It was a debate.
Not everybody landed punches like you did, though.
It was a debate.
So you don't mean it?
It was a debate. That the whole reason, literally, it was a debate.
It was a debate, giggle, giggle, hyena style. So basically, what she got called on right there was the fact that she called her now number one on the ticket a racist. and then cited the reasons why he was a racist. But it was a debate, so therefore, we don't care anymore.
I've never seen.
How is this even possible?
I've never seen a clip that is more penetrating about somebody's personality than that one. Because if you listen to that, all you say to yourself is, why should I believe anything that she says in public? If everything's simply packaged for a debate, and then she doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down on something that makes her look like just a manipulative climber who's interested in nothing but power and will say anything to get it, which is pretty much what she is.
What really got me about that clip, I have to say, is the laugh and the obvious, really unconcealed joy in her voice and in her eyes that, are these fools taking me seriously when I say things like this? No, of course, it was a debate. I was, obviously I wasn't being honest. Only idiots would think I was being honest at that point. And it's that condescending laugh of hers. And she did the same thing way back when, after being responsible for locking up, thousands and thousands of black men for, nothing more than the possession of a relatively small amounts of marijuana, and then she was once asked whether or not she partakes, and she laughed. She did exactly the same laugh. It's that laugh that says, "Oh, you idiots that I'm taking advantage of you like this." And it's just such an appalling thing. The laugh itself, to me, is enough to sink, or should be enough to just completely sink Biden's campaign. Is just her, that awful laugh of hers.
She makes Hillary Clinton look sincere.
All right, my clip comes from 5 months ago. Dust it off. The real racist in this race, in my humble opinion, is Joe Biden. And this is just one more instance of that. Let's roll the video, Frank.
just saying, geez, the reason I was able to stay sequestered in my home is because some black woman was able to stack the grocery shelf.
This clip, I believe, was buried by the leftist media. Then it was removed from YouTube. Talk about American Pravda. We have a propaganda campaign going on in this country.
I just don't know how, after all the things that he's said over the years, in, you know, culminating with if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. I mean, I just really wonder how many black people are enthusiastic about voting for Joe Biden. I'm not going to make some grand prediction that Trump's going to get 20% of the black vote or anything. He'll get more of it, all among men, not among women. Women of color, you know, are completely turned off to him. But I don't know how the trickle of comments that he's made that sort of reveal what he thinks inside.
Apologize for what?
Inside himself about black people makes you really wonder what kind of black person would be enthusiastic about voting for this guy unless they fully believe what they've been bombarded with by the elite media over these last 4 years, which is that Trump is an unconstrained, you know, undiluted racist and white supremacist. And, you know, you can't discount that bombardment of people.
All righty. Well, that was a wild ride. No wonder everyone says the left and the right are living in alternate universes. Some really good clips today, guys. We would vote if Sarah was here, but she's not. And that's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other segments on your favorite video platform. Thanks so much for tuning in. And remember, surf on over to LibertyNation.com. Subscribe to our popular conservative news daily briefing. Visit our Roku channel. And now we have a Rumble page where this program can be seen along with all our other Liberty TV shows. And remember, guys, Liberty all the time and everywhere.
Election 2020 Big Bottom Flash Reports are coming. On election night, at the bottom of every hour, LibertyNation.com will give you Election Night 2020, 90 seconds at a time, with our Big Bottom Flash Reports. You'll get the drop with our one-stop shop. We'll shed the light on Fight Night. Tune into LibertyNation.com on election night for our Big Bottom Flash Reports at the bottom of every hour. 90 glorious seconds for everything you need to know without the spin.